Hey there.
Hey guys.
How's it going?
Hey.
Hi. How are you? Just waiting a minute or two to wait for people to get on. I see one there. Who we got here? Got a few people coming on now. Hey everybody. Say hi. Let us know where you're from. Hey Greg. He said nice. We'll explain in a minute. He waved. Hi. Hey guys. Hey Krista. From I can't say that. Jacksboro, Tennessee. Hey Cheryl. Sandra. Just waiting another minute or two. Think we're good.
I think we're good too.
Okay. Hey guys, my name's Sabrena. I'm a grateful believer. I struggle with codependency and food issues.
Hey everybody, my name's Allen. I'm a grateful believer as well, and I struggle with codependency and anger.
Hey there.
Hey.
So a couple days ago on, we're just going to go ahead. He's laughing at us. Look, Greg's laughing at us. We'll explain in a minute why we got this wallet between us. So a few days ago on Facebook Live, Rodney and Carol were talking about conflict resolution. And we thought we would kind of piggyback on that and talk about boundaries tonight. So this is why we have this wall up between us. We'll take it down in a minute, right?
I think we'll take it down now.
Okay.
We kind of got the idea.
So we want to talk about boundaries. This is kind of one of my favorite topics in recovery because it's something that I never had boundaries in my own life. And really and truly recovery is what helped me learn really what they were, how to implement them, how to apply them. Like practical application, I just love in terms of recovery in general, and just teaching others as well. Like, because we can get a lot of information, right, that says this is the what, and even this is the why. Johnny talks about that in some of his teachings, and it's like we can discover the why, we can talk about the what, but how to apply it practically in our own lives sometimes can be a struggle, right? And so we've gone through a lot of trial and error in our own marriage, lots and lots of trial and error. We've been in recovery for 13 years.
We lots of experience.
Lots of experience. And really a lot of ups and downs. In fact, in the beginning of the recovery process, it was a lot more downs than it was ups, because it was kind of like, you know, the saying, it gets worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
Was absolutely true for us. We had a lot of years of damaging each other, almost 20 years of really damaging and hurting each other because of the things we had been through in our life, the experiences we had been through. And so we had some things to deal with at the beginning of our recovery, not just learning about ourselves, but dealing with the damage we had done to each other and figuring all of that out. And so it definitely, this process of figuring it out has been was very super messy, and it's still there. We still struggle. We still deal with stuff. In fact, is one of our favorite things to talk about because of what this program has done in terms of our marriage, how it has healed it, how it has strengthened it, and we've been able to learn things to overcome those things instead of letting it damage us to the point that we couldn't make it. Yeah. So
a big part of that was, of course, boundaries. A big part of our recovery and working through that was boundaries and establishing boundaries, respecting each other's boundaries, and so forth too. So tonight, when we're talking about it, of course, we're talking about it in the context of us as a couple. We're married. We live together. And you know, this might not, hopefully we do. We still live together. And of course, this might not apply to everybody. We're both in recovery.
Yes.
So that is definitely a help as well too.
And it doesn't always apply to everybody. Right. That's one of the biggest questions we get, how to deal with that.
Right. So, you know, I mean, you might live alone. You might be with somebody that's not in recovery. But this still applies. It still applies to all your relationships, whether they're their parents, siblings, spouse, friends, co-workers, whatever, you know, they all, this is still going to apply in those as well too.
Yeah. In fact, like we both had to deal with setting boundaries, not just with each other, but in all of those other relationships.
Yes.
Like that's something we had to learn in recovery as well. So it's something that is so applicable to every person across the board.
Yeah. And if you have questions and stuff as we're talking throughout the night, please post them. The national team, state reps and stuff are on there. And we're going to try to get to them and answer some at the end. But of course, those guys are on there as well too to kind of help answer any
State reps
questions
and
as
national
well, too.
team. Yep.
So,
but just please understand that we're not professional counselors.
No, that's right.
We do not claim to know it all and to have all of the answers. And so, take what we say from that perspective, that it's really just about our own personal experiences, our own personal situation. Like, it's going to look different for everybody. People are different. They respond to things differently. They deal with things differently. And we won't come even close to touching all of the topics all of the things that this topic would need to be covered in full. It's so extenuating. So just please remember that as we're talking about it. So one of my favorite scriptures about this is in Galatians. And so Galatians 6:2 says, carry one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. And then in Galatians 6:5, just a couple of scriptures later, it says, for each one should carry his own load. So repeating, carry one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ, and for each one should carry his own load. So that feels like, it sounds like it could be contradictory, right? We're saying, help each other, carry each other's burdens, but then carry your own load. And so burdens in verse 2 really refers to something that is too heavy for us to carry on our own. It's something that we absolutely need the support of other people, and oftentimes need the help of others in order to get through, in order to take care of it. Like, this has been in our recovery, that's been huge. Like, a big part of recovery obviously is carrying each other's burdens, right? When we're sharing in our open share groups, we're talking to our sponsors and accountability partners. That's all about helping with each other's burdens, the things that we can help each other with. But when you go into verse 5, where it talks about carrying your own load, that is referring to something that I can and should take care of and take responsibility for myself, on my own. It's what I can and should handle on my own. Oftentimes we get these things confused in our lives, especially if we come from trauma. We have hurts, habits, and hangups, which we all do, right? And so oftentimes we get these things confused, and we ask other people to carry our loads, the things that we should be responsible for. Ask other people to take care of those and take responsibility for those things. So this has been a big growth experience for us to learn what that looks like, and when we were doing that, how we were doing that, where we weren't taking responsibility for ourselves, and that kind of thing. So for example, taking responsibility for my own happiness is a healthy thing, right? That's carrying my own load. That is not others' burden to take on, to be responsible for my happiness. He's not responsible for my happiness. My parents aren't, my siblings aren't, my friends are not responsible for that. That is my load to carry. It's something I'm responsible for. So boundaries in general, that's another example of things that I need to take responsibility for on my own, that's my load to take responsibility for. So others can respect or not respect that, and we'll talk about that a little bit, but boundaries are about that. And boundaries, kind of what they are the things that I'll accept and not accept for myself in my own life. Things that I want or don't want in my own life. What's okay with me? What's not okay with me? Where do I end and someone else begins? That's something that was terribly difficult for us, is that, yes, we're a couple, but we are not extensions of each other. We are our own people. We are individuals. And so, kind of cutting that cord and that line that said we are not individuals anymore was a big part of it. And that can happen again in other relationships, our relationships with our parents or our siblings or whatever. I definitely had codependency with my kids, and so we were taking responsibility for things from each other that we shouldn't have and that we didn't need to. So boundaries are about what I own, what I need to own, what I take responsibility for, and what I don't. So making sure that I keep that line that boundary there.
Yeah, and it's important. I mean, that gives me the freedom, gives us the freedom. It gives me the freedom to control my own life, not control somebody else's, whether it is her or our kids or people at work, or
Which was a big struggle for you, right?
Which was a big struggle for me, people at work. Yeah, controlling, that they didn't do something, having, shaming them or calling them out because they didn't do something that I thought they should have done,
And not as a responsibility, but something that was like your preference.
Yes, my preference, exactly. Not respecting their decision to choose to do what they need to do or how they need to do it. I choose that freedom, and it can't be given or taken away from me. It's up to me to do that. God gave us each free will to make our choices for ourselves. Of course, that doesn't mean that we're not considerate of others' feelings and take them into account. It's good, loving, and godly to do so. We just have to make sure that we don't make decisions that are we're not making the decisions to make somebody else happy. I'm not going to compromise my beliefs or whatever. I'm not going to compromise my beliefs to make somebody else happy or to make somebody else do what I think that they need to do.
To appease them.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I did that for 20 years in our marriage. It was really, and before that, in relationships before that, it was always about not making someone else angry, not hurting their feelings. So I wasn't able to make my own choices, and I often felt very controlled. Definitely in our marriage, that was the case. I felt like I was being controlled, and never realized until recovery that was something that I gave away. Like, I gave my freedom away and decided that I would only choose things that would make him happy, whether or not it was something that I was okay with or not okay with, or whatever it may be. So that was something that I had to discover for myself. Now, on the other hand, boundaries are not about being selfish. It's all about me. That's not what this is about. Boundaries are, and in fact, people, when they start using boundaries or trying to use boundaries, sometimes they can get manipulative in it, and they actually abuse using boundaries, and they use it to punish people or to try to change them or fix them. They attach this expectation to a boundary that says, if I have a boundary, then you should respect it, and I'm expecting you to respect it. And if those expectations aren't met, then I'm angry, upset, hurt, whatever. And so, yes, there can be a hope attached to, I hope that it changes things. I did have that hope with us. Like, I hoped he would stop being angry and controlling, and would deal with that issue for himself. But I had told him early in our recovery, like, whether you do or whether you don't, I'm seeking recovery for myself, and I'm learning how to get healthy for me. That it couldn't be about changing him. And so in the past, I would do things like giving him the silent treatment was like my favorite, my favorite way of dealing with my own emotions, my own hurt and anger when he would be controlling or whatever. And I would absolutely think that was valid, and probably thought it was me putting a boundary up, but it wasn't, because I wasn't actually being direct with him or talking through the situations or whatever. And so that's not what boundaries are for. Oftentimes people will say, I tried a boundary on my whatever, family member, my spouse, whatever, and it didn't work. And I would say, well, then it wasn't actually a boundary that you were using. It was actually, that was you trying to manipulate or change somebody else. So, for example, I said this a few weeks ago when we talked. I said, me saying to him, you can't talk to me that way, whatever way that is, or you can't talk to me in this specific way. I can think that that's a boundary, right? But what if someone doesn't respect that boundary? What if he talks to me that way anyway? I can't control him, right? There's nothing I can do to actually make him not talk to me that way just because I said it. And so I may think I put up a boundary and he didn't listen. The boundary didn't work. But boundaries have to have consequences that I can follow through with, right? And so when I say, and again, the consequence isn't to punish them, it's to keep me safe.
Yes.
It's to keep me protected. It's to make sure that I'm taking care of me. And so when I say, I don't like it when you talk to me this way, and if you do, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to leave the room. And if you don't respect that boundary, I'm going to leave the house, which is a little difficult right now. But I can still get in a car, right? I can walk around the block.
That's right.
You know, I have to do something that is a follow through of that actually isn't me just trying to control you into doing something.
Yeah, I remember one of the first times you did that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was an issue with we had a storm and one of the light sockets went out and got damaged, and I was upset, and I was spiraling, you know, mumbling, blah, 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 whatever, cussing under my breath and all that stuff. And then she was like, you can't, you know, you need to calm down. And I just wanted to keep going, because the pattern before, I wanted to drag you into my misery and, you know, and be miserable together. And she left. She's like, I'm all right. You're going to act this way. I'm gone. And she walked out of the house and drove off.
Yeah.
And I had to sit there thinking, well, now I can't be bad by myself. You know, this is dumb. You know, so that's putting a limit on something, right? And a boundary. And boundaries and limits are pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
Right?
It can
so,
be.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then, you know, that was one of the questions we got, is like, what's the difference between a boundary and a limit? It's the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, you can, if you're going to talk to me that way, then I'm going to leave.
Right.
And so then, okay, I have to make a decision. If I want to have a conversation with you, then I have to talk in the right manner.
Right. And the thing was, you know, in the past I had done the same thing. I had left the house many, many times in the 20 years prior, mad about his anger and him spiraling and starting to get too into it. And so, but in those cases, I would leave the house and slam the door on the way out. I would screech the tires of the car in the front yard. The whole purpose of it, I was putting on a show for him to punish him and to try to make him feel stupid for what he was doing, instead of saying to myself, you know what, he's responsible for his own emotions. I can't change him, fix him. I can say, I want you to calm down. And if he does, he does. If he doesn't, then okay, I can instill that boundary. When I left that day, it was such a victory, because when I left that day, I had peace in my spirit, and I didn't get angry. I didn't angrily say to him, fine, you're going to act like the way I'm going, which is what I would have done in the past as well. Instead, I went up and I said, your emotions, you're kind of spiraling. I'm getting the knot in my stomach that I normally get. I'm going to leave for a while and just kind of let you deal with your own emotions. And I wasn't angry, and I left quietly, and I didn't think about him while I was gone. It wasn't me stewing in it or anything. I went to Starbucks and sat there for a couple hours, probably worked on my computer or read or whatever. And so I was able to have a peace. That was me taking care of me. That's what a boundary actually looks like. Now, I'm going to tell you, it hasn't always been that good. From that point, it's not like this has been perfect, and we've not had instances where we reverted back to that kind of behavior, right? It still happens. So, and past experiences may, you know, have fed into that. For us, it certainly, I'm going to speak for me, it certainly did. We can lose a sense of ourselves, never learn to establish boundaries, or maybe even be discouraged to have them, right? In our family of origin, we might have been told, you can never say no to something, you can't have feelings about something, if you can't express if you don't like something, right? And whether or not that was overt, where we were told that, or whether it was just the body language and the tone, and you know, it was a silent rule that you couldn't express yourself or have boundaries for yourself, kind of thing. We dealt with this with our daughter when she was a teenager. She kind of went through a minute of like trying to have that attitude thing, and we would say, you can express how you feel. If you're angry, we get that, whatever, but you're going to do it in a respectful way. So you go take some time in your room, chill out. When you can come back and talk to us in a respectful manner, then we'll do that. So for me, abandonment issues played a big part of it. I wanted so much to be loved and accepted by someone that I just gave up all of my free will and choices. So
yeah, and of course, now that we're dealing with the coronavirus, this pandemic, and there's additional boundaries put on all of us. You know, we can't gather together. We can't go to our churches. We can't go to our groups. Even when you're going outside and you go to the store, they got markers in the store now where they tell you to stand 6 feet apart from everybody. And some stores even have one-way aisles, you know. Those are just kind of physical boundaries that they put on us that we have to kind of respect, you know, to prevent, you know, us getting sick and others getting sick as well too. And if being at home, you know, our boundaries might be tested even more. You know, we're in close quarters. We're kind of, I don't want to say stuck, but we're together all the time. Stuck might be a bad word. We're together all the time. So those boundaries can be tested. And, you know, whether you're, and if you're at home alone, you know, then, you know, you still may be talking to relatives, or you working from home as well too. You know, no matter what your situation is, you can install boundaries at this time or any other time.
Yeah, and in fact, Johnny, great quote here. He says, "Do not stand for abusive behavior. It's not your fault, and you do not deserve it." Yeah. I love that. So you may be in even a very toxic environment right now, and so this is a very important time to kind of not tolerate that and put up with that and deal with.
Yeah, and that's key to make sure even if you are alone or you're in a situation where maybe just one of you is in recovery and the other person doesn't have experience with recovery and they don't quite understand what's going on with you trying to get yourself healthy, because we experienced that too as well.
We did.
But you know, that's when you need your support team. You need to be reaching out to your accountability team, your sponsors, you know, and everybody in your groups that you need to be staying in contact with, because they will give you the support that you need during that time. You know, I always have that phone call to talk to somebody as well too for that. Yeah. So one of the things that we've learned over the last couple of weeks is that the last 2 weeks I've been home from work. I took a leave of absence from work, and actually
for 30
just
days.
30 days, and actually I just extended it till 60.
To 60, which could not have happened successfully in the past.
No. So yeah, I'm going to be home for the next, until June 3rd, I think it is, when I actually go back to work. So a couple weeks ago I came home and the dishes in the dishwasher hadn't been emptied, and I was like, come on, man, really? Like, you're home all day, you know, you work from home, just empty the dishes, whatever. And I was upset and was kind of stewing about or whatever, and she's like, what's wrong? I'm like, nothing. And, you know, we went down that whole road and all that.
The manipulation
road and all that, you know. But the funny thing was that I you know, I didn't respect that she had boundaries for, I didn't put boundaries on my own behavior, first of all, you know, with the way I was acting, but also respect that she has boundaries that she does with work and home. And you might want to
elaborate on that
a little bit.
So, yeah, so later on in the evening, I talked to him about it. So this is another thing about having conversations about boundaries. I love when Rodney and Carol talked about, you want to talk about these things when things are going good and they're calm between you, not when you're at high levels of emotion. So in that moment, I was irritated by his anger, and there was a reason for it, but we didn't talk about it then. Later in the evening, I had said, listen, I need you to understand, I'm not like a stay-at-home wife, where that's my job. I'm actually working from home. And so that was the start of the conversation. But the next week, we spend time from the very beginning of recovery. We started this. In the beginning, we took 3 hours a week where we sat aside time to talk. We read through books together that were about recovery, that were about all different topics about that. And so we've stuck with doing that. We take time to talk to each other. We make an appointment for it when we're in a calm place, when we're in a good place. And so when we talked the next week, I said, you know, because I'm not a highly disciplined person. It's a struggle for me. We've talked about it many times. He's a very disciplined person. And so I said I put boundaries around time for work at home. So I said, you know, I make myself not do things like do the dishes or do wash or do different things around the house when I've set aside time for work, which is during the day while he's at work, I'm working. And so he had to look at it like, I'm working the same hours you are, and during that time I'm not doing that kind of stuff. I do that later like I would have if I was working away from home. And then your response?
Yeah, I was like, I didn't know that. I didn't understand that. I just was like, you know, I always thought you're home. You got all day to, you know, do this and that and the other, you know, and thinking back on it, of course, well, I go to work. I physically go to work. And so I don't do those things. I come home and do things. And so I have to respect that that's a boundary that she has for her time and her work time, you know, that she's going to spend this time working and then other times doing other things and tasks around the house. So, yeah, I think
It
it's
shocked
important.
him. He was sitting
Yeah.
there like going, I never knew that. It
I
was
never
like
thought
a
about it that way.
revelation. Yeah.
But that didn't come about just because, I mean, the main reason it came, like I fully got a full understanding of it is because now I've been home
Right.
and I've experienced it, and I have to, I'm not doing anything. I'm just doing projects around the house, but
Not that he's not doing anything.
she's
doing
actually
a lot of stuff
working.
Right.
So I have to, respect that. I have to let her do her thing and, do my own thing, and that keeps us balanced and, in a healthy thing too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but let's say you're in a position. First, there's a question there. I can't read it. It says how you communicate your boundary is important. If you
Yeah.
do it with anger and resentment, it won't be heard.
Yeah, that's exactly like we were talking about.
Yes.
Talking in another time, like we're not talking in the heat of the moment.
Yes.
But coming back later and talking, or if you're having a weekly talk, those are the times that you want to express those things. It's like, let's lay this boundary down or whatever. This is something that I need you to respect about me. And when we're doing it in that calmness and not in that heat of the moment, I think it will actually, it's easier for somebody else to hear.
Yes.
Because honestly, when we're arguing, I'm not hearing you. All I'm hearing in my head is what I want to say next.
Yep. It's
the
this.
wall is up. That's it.
Yes. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But and let's say you're in a position where another person doesn't consider your boundaries, because this has been awesome. It's part of the reason it's worked now is because from the beginning he was the first one to say, we probably need to have a boundaries conversation, right? Because I'm going to be home, because he knows what our history is, and that was an important thing for us to consider and think about. And he immediately was respecting the fact that not only do I need that work time, but I also, we have time we spend together and do things, and then there are times where we need to kind of split and not spend so much time together. And so he'll be back in the other room watching something, I'll be out here watching something, or I'll be working, whatever, and he's not like in there constantly while I'm doing that. But let's say that someone doesn't consider or respect your boundaries, or think about not, because he was considering this before I even brought it up. And now when I bring it up, he does think about it and we talk about it. And, in the beginning, that wasn't the case. When I first started putting boundaries up, he was like, you're not being loving, you're being ungodly, you're
not a godly woman.
Yeah, now you're hurting
Saying
me.
no.
He threw all kinds of manipulation at me. And it was like, now you're hurting me because, I had been hurt by his anger and control for so long. But I was also hurt by my own codependency. I had to take responsibility for that. But anyway, it was just like, in the beginning, it wasn't there. And so I had to make decisions and choices about instilling boundaries, making choices, having consequences, and all of that in the face of him not respecting them. And in fact, trying to keep pushing, because he wanted his codependent wife back, which I get, he kind of, everything was about him. I encouraged that and enabled that. And so if you're in that position, it just has to be about, I'm going to make these decisions to put boundaries up. And you do need a support system. My safe people at that time were my CR ladies in my open share groups, my step study groups, the women that at my church, those were my safe people. It wasn't him, because he was fighting this so hard. Yeah. And so I needed the feedback that's healthy. Like, I didn't need people just saying, yes, you're right, and he's this terrible person, all that. That's not what I needed in my life. I needed people to help me look at my responsibility, my part, and to encourage me in setting boundaries and figuring out how to do that in a healthy way. And so other people have to be your lifeline in this. So
I think it's important, to, when you do make a decision, if you have to make a decision about boundaries, have that conversation and put up a consequence so that, like we talked about earlier, if you get mad and angry, I'm going to leave. That consequence is set, and you got to follow through with it. Yeah. And like we talked about, Rodney and Carol last week talked about conflict resolution, and we just talked about a little bit too. Make sure you have conversations with each other, not with just spouses, but, if you're dealing with family members and anybody, siblings, whatever, anyone. That you work people, make sure you have those conversations when things are good between you, not when they're heated, because that will make you, enable you to hear each other in those situations as well too. And of course, like we said, if you're in a toxic environment, it's very important. I saw that there were some phone numbers put out there, some hotlines to call. If you're in an abusive relationship as well too. but it's important to reach out to
Yes.
your accountability partners, sponsors, other people in recovery to stay strong during this time.
Yeah, because there are levels of this that are manageable. If you're in an abusive relationship, that's a totally different conversation, and there are people that are professionals that can help with that.
Yeah.
So please use those hotlines. Search for organizations that you can and people that you can talk to help you through that, because it was tough doing this with us, and it wasn't ever an abusive level. There was manipulation, absolutely, and there was we weren't healthy for each other, and it was hard enough doing it. There were times where I would say, I said this a few weeks ago, I can't get healthy being here with you 24 hours a day, because I didn't know how to set those boundaries, and I just stayed knotted up. And so in an abusive relationship, that's something else, and you need to make sure that you're reaching out to people that can help you with that.
Absolutely.
So
time's flown by.
it has. It's actually time. Do we have any last comments or anything?
Just one last comment that said, if both spouses in recovery, is that even more difficult than only one person? And I don't know. I mean, that's a tough question, just because we kind of started recovery together, and some of our obstacles were, is she doing her recovery? I'm doing mine. Is she working on her stuff?
Trying to fix each other and control each other's recovery.
This is what they said this week in the lesson. Are you paying attention to that? So there's both. I think there's
pros and cons.
Pros and cons for both.
Yes,
definitely.
Yes, absolutely. And because
you're further down the road, though, we both understand.
Right.
So that helps. But
yes.
But yeah, in the beginning, it was. It was definitely challenging too. Yeah,
it was definitely worse than it had been in a long time. And I was like, I'm not going to we said several times where I feel like we're not going to make it through this. It was so hard. So I'd say that you're probably going to face struggle, whether you're both in recovery, only one of you is in recovery. You just have to practice the principles for yourself.
Yep.
I didn't do it for my marriage. I knew that it was the only thing that might possibly save our marriage, though. I would say if I don't do this, I don't believe we're going to make it. I don't feel like we can, with the level of damage and hurt that we have, but I knew that it was the only chance. Because if I couldn't be healthy regardless of his behavior, then I wouldn't be able to make it through. And so you have to do it for you, and not worry about the other person. Bring them into it as they're willing. Yeah. Absolutely. And I always talk about residual recovery. I always believe that a family member, spouse, friends, or whatever that are not in recovery, that my recovery has an impact on them. And I call that residual recovery. And spouses catch that a lot.
They do.
So
all right. Thank you guys so much for being here tonight. Tomorrow night, I think it's Roger and Sarah.
Yes,
Stanton, so that'll be good to hear from them.
Absolutely.
And then Pastor John and Cheryl Baker on Monday night too. So that'll be cool.
Yep.
So thank you guys again for being here tonight. We love you. And go ahead and
close in prayer.
Okay. Let's pray. Father God, again, thank you so much for this time. Thank you for the opportunity again to share. Lord, we just pray for everybody out there going through this stuff, that they'll be able to establish and maintain healthy boundaries during this time. And maybe even strengthen them and enable them to continue when we kind of get back to doing things that we were doing before. Again, we just pray for our country, pray for our leadership, Father, that they would just make good decisions about everything going forward.
Yes.
And Father, ultimately we know that you're in control, and that we know you're going to defeat this. So again, thank you for this time, Lord, and we love you and praise you in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen.
Good night,
All right, guys. We'll see you tomorrow night.